Welcome everybody. Good to see some familiar faces and some others. I'm so excited today to hear about our digital content producer Nuvpreet's recent trip to China. She traveled all around and really got to experience a side of China that we never get to experience over here in this side. And so I'm really excited to hear about her firsthand experience of China. My name is Megan. I'm the campaign coordinator for our China's Not Our Enemy campaign. And what we're really focused on right now is preventing an escalation of conflict with China. And one of the ways we do that, of course, is encouraging people-to-people dialogue and interaction, visiting China, seeing it for yourself, and understanding that there's so many beautiful things there, beautiful things that we have to protect. Um, And so, of course, I really appreciate Nuvpreet for making the trip and coming back and sharing her experience with us. We also have here Mimi Zhu, who is Australian author, writer, and artist who is based in Shanghai. And Mimi joined Nuvpreet for some of her trip, and so they're going to be talking about their experience together. So thank you so much, Nuvpreet and Mimi, for being here today.
Thank you, Megan. Yeah, I was so inspired by like watching the series of report backs you did, Megan, and like I think a couple other people who are on the call. And I was just like, I have to go. So I found the cheapest flight I could possibly get and went there. And I'm glad really, really glad I did. Um, I think maybe the way I'll do it, I've like put some photos together, and I think some of the photos remind me and kind of illustrate some of the main points I took away. And then I think a lot of things that I was thinking about, I spoke about with Mimi as well. So maybe we can kind of have some of the discussions that I think we had when we were there, going through them. So I might share my screen, but yeah, just to introduce myself, my name's Nuvpreet. I'm a digital content producer at CODEPINK. I'm based in London as well. And so some of my reflections maybe are in like a British context, but I think all the awful things there are also here. So it makes sense. So yeah, I will share my screen. I don't know, Mimi, if you wanted to say anything while I do that.
Just hi everyone. And it was such a pleasure to travel with Nuvpreet and to get to know her and just to always be connected in the Code Pink world. And I've met some of you comrades as well on your trip to China. So it's just great to be able to continuously report back on our amazing experiences. And I'll just be riffing off with Nuvpreet about our time together. And I'm really looking forward to hearing about Nuvpreet's time as well.
Yay. Okay, how do I put this? Oh yeah, okay. Yeah, so the flights that I got there was from Hungary to Ningbo, which were really, really cheap. If anyone hasn't been, that's a good route to go through. I think it was like $200 for a one-way flight, which made it like so possible. And my first experience in China was Ningbo, and I think I now think it so fondly because of how magical it felt just walking into a park. And I think I was kind of overwhelmed by a lot of the things that then I realized were common in China, such as the water being really clean and there being like a public space occupied by like people, not in a commercial way. Um, like the bin, experiencing how bins work in China, which is not just like one overflowing trash bin that like is never emptied and no one really like considers throwing it in there. It was the cleanest bin I've ever seen in my life, separated into like residual waste, recycling, food waste, and sometimes the recycling was separated into like paper and plastic. I would just sat in this park for a bit before my train, and I was just like, this is what an incredible already like having this experience. And this I think this park was just like just opposite the train station. And that I also then was like, it's so quiet here despite being around a really main road. And it was because most of the cars were electric. And so I think I was having a lot of these, my first encounters with, again, what is like commonplace in China happened in this park. So I hold it really, really fondly as a place. And that was also the first time that I got to see a train station, which was just like unbelievable. Nothing like any train station or even airport I think I'd ever been to. Um, and just like the process of the trains was amazing. This train I got was from Ningbo to Hangzhou, and it was like 58 minutes, and it cost around like probably like $12. And I just got a train the same distance earlier this week from London to Birmingham. Basically the same distance, if not a bit shorter. And it took me 2.5 hours, and it cost me like double the price. And it was also a horrible experience. People were standing. There was no hot water. There was no cold water. I didn't venture to the toilet, but if I did, I don't think it would have been very good. It like such a stressful experience, whereas getting the train felt like a luxury, even though it's something that is just like a commonplace thing. Um, so I think that was my first impression. I was just like thrown all these things, I think, immediately after getting off the flight. And that yeah, that Ningbo was very, very short trip. Mimi, had you been to Ningbo, right, properly or no?
I've actually never been there, but you've got me really curious. And I really like what you said about the trains because, like you said, like the experience itself feels luxurious. I actually was on a high-speed rail yesterday. I went from Shanghai to Guizhou, which is like a pretty far distance if you look at the map of China. It only took me 7 hours, which is unheard of. And it was just so lovely because I personally hate flying. I hate being on a plane. It makes me really anxious, just like my personal preference. But having the option to have the all of China connected by high-speed rail, and I'm not just talking major cities, I'm talking villages. I'm talking tiny cities. I'm talking towns. And they're like farmer towns that are super rural and super out there. So tickets are naturally very, very affordable. They're very frequent as well. And like you said before, this isn't a luxury, actually. It is a commonplace necessity. It's a commonplace facility for everyday people. And you can see everyday people on the train. Something ridiculous that I did this time was so there's like QR codes on the seat handles, and if you use WeChat to scan the QR code, you can order takeout to your seat, right? So if you order like a meal for lunch and you plan it in advance and you say where you're getting off, where you got on the train, you can select which station the restaurant can come to bring the food to your seat. Like that is ridiculous. That is like VIP first class experience that I wouldn't even get or I've never experienced before on like any kind of situation. But that having the food delivered to my seat, it was crazy. And it cost $5. So yeah, this is one of the features of the train that is available to every single person. It is not separated by class. It is not separated by just the wealthy people getting to have that. So that was my 2 cents. I'm sorry. Please continue.
Yeah. No, I think the train one I've had so many reflections on because I think particularly in the UK, trains are a big point of conversation. Obviously in the US, there's like trains have their own history where like you don't have trains because of like the oil industry. But at least in Britain we had like a nationalized rail service where trains kind of was seen as like this is better for people, this is better for the environment. And that really turned when rail was privatized, and it's only getting worse. So the prices are way worse. The train service is way worse. There are fewer trains. They're always overcrowded, and there's like no funding really put into them because it's more and more outsourced. Um, and like they're just cost cutting to make more profits. And so it's like such a surreal experience to go from the topic of conversation being like, oh, this train was too expensive, so I had to get a flight. Like that's what people are turning to in the UK. When we have the infrastructure of rail, people just aren't able to afford to get a train. And instead, they're having to go to an airport and fly a distance that's not very far. And the idea that we're like backtracking from what is supposed to be seen as like a superior model of transport, one that's like better for what everyone knows that this is better for the environment, of course, than flying. Um, but it's something that people are being like priced out of. And so, and that was one big thought I had was like, why would you ever need to get a plane in China? It feels like it feels like the conversation is just completely flipped and how that's actually a possibility. Not only that trains exist and that they're actually affordable, but like there's actually kind of a commitment to, yes, this like these electrified trains get people places faster for cheaper and like without polluting. And I think that's just even if it was like actually the worst train in the world and it still like got people places, I would have been impressed. But the fact that this was this level, like I also tried, I like the QR code was the best thing ever. You get so much information. But also I noticed, I don't know if this is real if you've had an experience with it, Mimi, but it seemed like you could buy fruit and veg from like farmers on the route as well. I wish I like wanted to try it, but I wasn't it was too yeah, I wasn't brave enough.
Yeah, you can do that, and it is from the different regions where it is the specialty fruit. So as you go through China as well, there's a map that shows you like all the specialties of each region that you're passing by, all the special delicacies that you're passing by. Like I specifically got a delicacy of noodle from that specific train station that I was passing through. And on top of that, you can get fresh produce from farmers who they source the fruit from. So, yeah, incredible.
Ugh, it's so amazing. Um, yeah, so that was that first experience. I got a couple more trains and I think maybe I have another photo of it there. So my first actual stop was Hangzhou, which maybe was like one of my favorite places. It was kind of
You want to listen?
I should have had a look at I forget the size of these places, but it always surprises me how like both big and small places feel. Like they don't feel like sprawling, overwhelming places, but everywhere you think is much smaller is of course much bigger. So the skyline here was just absolutely incredible. And it's not one of the skylines that people will know outside of China because obviously we know some of the big cities, but getting to see a place that I'd like never really heard of before have this absolutely incredible both built up um like city and then some of the most incredible natural beauty I've ever seen in my life. Like this, the bottom left photo is from Westlake, which is like a very famous tourist spot in China. And there were a lot of tourists, which was a really nice thing to see as well. I always think it's a nice sign when people can actually afford to travel around a country. Um, so I think my main takeaways were just again experiencing some of the things that I realized were kind of commonplace in China for the very first time, which is seeing just absolute stunning places at night and in the day. On the top right is a photo from kind of this complex, like there was a Martyrs Memorial complex, and this is this incredible kind of like I don't know what it would be called, but it was like kind of a brass stucco, I guess. That was like all the way around this wall. I should have got a better photo. And then in the middle there was like a bigger statue. And this was commemorating like the martyrs who died in the founding of the revolution. And I just thought it was such a beautiful public space and people were just around and like taking photos. Um, and like down the steps, there was this amazing museum. Again, a Martyrs Memorial Museum, which I realized I think there are a few in each province. And this was again my first experience seeing one of these, and then I went to one in each city. And I thought it was so amazing having a history of the place you're in and having that as a revolutionary history for people to feel connected to. And another kind of commonplace thing was like having the martyrs from each place. And there were lots of flowers laid around. It like really felt like a place that people came to and like had a connection to, which I just thought was so incredible and so different to kind of any memorials I've really been to elsewhere. Um, and the photo on the bottom on the right is another one of my first experiences of many, which was a vegan buffet. So I'm vegan, and I think a big point that before going, people were like, "What? How are you gonna eat? Like, how are you gonna eat food in China?" And I've never eaten better in my life. The but the vegan buffets were just one thing, but there were many, many other things. But this again, price-wise, this cost, I think it was $3 for an all-you-can-eat buffet. You had about like 2.5 hours, and the food was so fresh, so healthy, the most like delicious variety of food, and everyone was so friendly. They were like, "You have to try this bit, and like try this if you've never had it before." And it was, yeah, I didn't realize that these existed, and I think a lot of them are Buddhist as well, which makes sense why they're like kind of around everywhere. And I have this like vegan food app, and they're just like they were in some of the smaller places as well, um, which was amazing. And it was just a place that it was busy. Like this is a place people were commonly eating at, and I think for a price that is like really that's obviously incredibly cheap for me coming from the West, but also I think within China that's actually, of course, really, really cheap. But it's again like seeing these kind of restaurants available for people where you can go and actually have incredibly nice food for a really cheap price, um, was something I had like never really experienced. And then I found a photo on the right, which I think is a video, but I don't know if it will play. Oh yeah, well, this was in the hotel, and I think again this is kind of commonplace, but it's a robot that was delivering like I think it was doing kind of everything. 我是9号机器人，很高兴认识大家。 But it yeah, I don't know, Mimi, I still don't know what the robot did. I think it was like room service plus other things.
So basically, there's a lot of like delivery apps in China where you can get meals delivered to your room. And the robots are there kind of to help the delivery drivers to not have to go up to the room themselves, because it takes time out of their work and it's just a bit more labor. And so what the delivery drivers can do is they can put the meal inside the robots, and then the robots themselves will go to the room and deliver it straight to people's doors. So there's like a handle on the top of the robot, and so you can lift it up and your meal will be in there. I did it before without knowing that the robot would come to my room, and so there was like a knock on my door, and I was like, okay, who is that? And it's just this like tiny little robot. And I'm like, oh, hey. And then it says, your meal is delivered to you. And I opened it and my meal was there. And so it saves the delivery driver a bit of time, the labor of going up to your room, of finding it. And the robot does it for you. So the robot is, in fact, helping people in their work instead of what the US does, which is use robots and AI and, all these kinds of technologies to kill people. Yeah.
Yeah, and that was another thing I saw around is like how technology was discussed, and the language around technology was like, how can we use these amazing advancements to serve people and to help people? And I mean, of course, increasingly so, we're seeing in the West these same technologies. The only language around them is like, how can we use this to not pay people or to cut jobs or to use it to automate drone systems and use it to better target killings? And again, the fact that these two places like that, this kind of language around technology can exist at the same time was amazing. But I was also just so impressed by this. And like this was just like kind of this was not like a luxury hotel. This was just like somewhere that has this, which is so cool. Like and now I wish I'd tried it, but I got to see it. Um, okay, yeah. Then after that was Shanghai, where Mimi and I then met, which was also which made it the best. But I think the the classic, the view was incredible, of course. But I think what made it really amazing, and I think um maybe Mimi, we spoke about this after, was like this strip, the Bund is just like a public access place. I think any places I've been to where I've seen a skyline like this, you'd imagine the viewing point is like kind of cut off, like it's private. There's all these like commercial zones, and I don't know, just I would never assume that when people got this shot, it was like there was just like a public kind of park that people were looking at it from. And these spaces, even maybe like one of the most commercial parts of China, still has these principles of like public space for people. And it was just like other tourists taking photos. There was like, you didn't have to pay to see this view. You didn't have to pay to, I don't know, there wasn't like a special platform that you could view it from. Everyone was looking at it. And around there was like some statues, like museums and things. And yeah, I think at that moment I was like, wow, this is both experiencing it in that way and then seeing the site. I was like, yeah, this is absolutely incredible. Um,
I think also, so when you go further down the Bund, that maybe a lot of people, a lot of tourists might not know about, but a lot of local people and people who live in Shanghai know about, which Nuvpreet, I'll take you next time, and anyone else who comes to Shanghai. There's this amazing part, which is not so much this amazing view, but it's like basketball courts, rock climbing, that are all free. There's skate parks, there's museums. The whole Bund is just like lined with public infrastructure and public facilities where people can have fun. They can go play, they can have sports. It's not a luxury dedicated exclusive zone, which I think some of these places that are obviously quite wealthy and commercial, like you said, would be a bit cut off and feel exclusive. But there's actual facilities that invite people to come and to enjoy as well. And I think because I live in Shanghai and I got to have a great time with Nuvpreet in Shanghai, it was really amazing to see one, the things that Nuvpreet noticed, the things that you kind of appreciated, like the bins, for example, right? Or the toilets and stuff like that. But on top of that, it's reminding me what will never stop being hopeful and incredible, because we were both so excited about these things. The public toilets. I could brag about the public toilets all day long because the public toilets in Shanghai are amazing. I actually have a video coming out about it. But I asked DeepSeek recently how many public toilets there are in Shanghai, and there are 12,000 public toilets in Shanghai. Um,
wow.
and then I looked up how many public toilets there are in New York, and it said 1,000. So that is a pretty big contrast, but as someone who lives here, it never ceases to impress me. All of these things that you note down, but it is so nice to be around people who really appreciate it. And a lot of those people are folks who live in the West or have lived in the West for a very long time. And they know that this is not the case for a lot of places, especially capitalist countries.
Yeah, the public toilets discussion I thought was pretty amazing because I think people obviously in China when when we seem so amazed that there are toilets that are clean and free and available in like common places, that just like seems like why would you be impressed by that? And that's obviously something that we should have. Um, but but I don't know, I think there's something so and it changes the way you engage in like public spaces when there are toilets around that you can go to. I think just from coming back and then like having a day out in London and being like, okay, now, okay, I've got to buy a coffee to get the code to go into the toilet in like this cafe. Or like, I'm actually going to drink less water because there's no toilet at this tube station. Like that already just, it not only constrains what you're able to do and how you're able to go to places, but it also, of course, forces you to spend more money on things. But it also just makes you feel like you shouldn't be in this public space, and this isn't a space for you. Like you have to then spend time looking out for one public toilet that everybody's at. Um, And then on the other side, being like, here's this amazing huge public park. Within it, there are loads of toilets, so you can spend your day here. There's no like idea that you're forced to go elsewhere and like spend money to access like what's one of the most basic needs humans have. I think something like that is it seems so small, but it actually was maybe the most profound impact I had from being there. And now I'm like, oh my God, not having a public toilet actually is not something that we should tolerate at all. Like, why is this acceptable that there aren't public toilets for people to use? Yeah, it's pretty depressing to come back to. Um, but yeah, I think I was really grateful to like be able to speak to you, Mimi, about some of these things because you both like spent enough time there to be like, yeah, this is what it's like. These things exist, but also you still have that like awe about the things that are normal being so amazing. Um,
Yeah, I mean, isn't basic humanity and basic dignity being able to use a toilet when you need to, right? I mean, there's a reason why New York, the wealthiest city in the world, smells like urine all the time when you walk in the streets of Manhattan, right? In the Upper East Side. There's a reason for that. And it's because people are being isolated and they're being robbed of the dignity to go to the bathroom. But then in Shanghai, like, what locals think, they're just like, well, duh. Like, obviously we should be able to go to the bathroom. And I think living in Shanghai versus living in New York, which I've also done, it is extremely, I don't know, my brain rewires every day, right? And then it's also especially rewiring as well, or just mind blowing, because obviously the US tells you such a different story about China. And it is very clear that the US is extremely threatened by things like that, something as simple as a public bathroom, because they intentionally want to rob people of their dignity and of a basic human right. So, yeah, Nuvpreet, we really got into it. We really got into the conversation. But I remember in New York, I literally had to plan out my meals or take stomach medication, in fear of having an accident, not having somewhere to go, or I would not drink that much water in a day, like these really, when I look back at it, things that none of us should be doing because, out of scarcity or out of fear of having an accident in public or something like that. And now I can actually experience being a human being, and I think again, it's really interesting what the US says about, Chinese people not having freedom and, the US being the hub of freedom and free speech or whatever, which as we have also seen is clearly not the case. But then let's just start with something as simple as using the loo, right? It's as simple as that, or having drinking water or having a roof over your head, which, yeah, I think in China is not even, it's not a luxury, it's a basic necessity.
yeah, I think I really like what you said about like it is another way just to rob you of your humanity. It's another way to like mean you have no dignity in public. And of course, that's especially true for people who are made vulnerable by the same government. And I think why it's such a threat is like it's a political choice not to build a toilet. It's a political choice to invest money in making a new fighter jet instead of building like 1,000 more toilets in a public space. And I think when you realize that it's a political choice, not because it's not possible, that's when you start to deconstruct so much that is essential to Western capitalism. And that's why I think we should talk about toilets more. That's one of the things I think I've been telling people, um, like coming back from China. Like I think the toilets and the trains and the bins actually, some of these like almost just like some of the basic necessities, um, of life, like transport, like waste in both senses. Like those things are so difficult, especially in public spaces, but also in like private spaces. Um, I'm like in Birmingham right now, and there's a bin strike on, which has been going on for like I think a few weeks now because the council refused to pay um like the I forgot the bin men like a decent wage. And instead, like my people here, instead of being so, I don't know, like challenge why the council refuses to like pay people a decent living wage. Instead, they're obviously annoyed and they're blaming people for not like taking rubbish. They think they're lazy. They think they just don't want to do their jobs. And the fact that the conversation is instead not about like why are these people that are so essential to our daily lives not being paid enough when this council will have money for other things. Um, it's mind-blowing. It rewires my brain the wrong way. I'm like, I can't believe again, I'm full for this. So yeah, I mean, I think that I had a lot of reflections like that, and I think some more that would come up. Another place in Shanghai that I thought was amazing. I don't know if you've been, maybe I think maybe you have the propaganda poster center, I think it was called, which just had it was like a museum just of posters, and it was just really amazing to see like how many they had. Um, starting, I think they had quite a lot from like the 20s and things, but I think this one was from like this 50s or something. Um, but just seeing some imagery that I think was really making me think of Palestine so much and like how there's been the solidarity and anti-war sentiment in China, um, both historically and today as a result of also their own past, which I guess I'll speak about in a second. It was really moving, I think, seeing some of these posters. Um, and this was another Martyrs Memorial Park and Museum. Again, I don't know if you've been there, Mimi, but this is amazing. It was like a huge complex, similar to the one I was mentioning in Hangzhou, where there's a focus on Shanghai as a place in like discussions about the revolution and like basically a history of the place. And yeah, again, the imagery was just so incredible, so profound. And it was just, yeah, a very moving place and really nice to see again a place connected to its history in this way of like resilience and like, just very revolutionary moving place. And then two more of my favorite moments. Mimi, I think I noticed you're wearing the jumper on the right, but I had like one of my favorite moments was going to see this statue of Marx and Engels, which is at this park. I forget the name of the park, but it was like a gorgeous day. The like trees were just blowing in the breeze. People were in the park. The park is separate from the one on the right. The photos on the right are from a different place to the ones on the left, just so you know. And then running right next to the statue was this person who was wearing this hoodie. And if you can't read it, it says I think it says the people united will never be defeated. And then it has, yeah, the Palestine flag and Chinese flag. And he was literally running around the statue. And in the background, I could hear people singing and dancing, people just like lounging in the sun. And I just had a moment being like, this is really how life should be lived. This is how I want to live life, at least. It just felt so like this was one of my profound moments where I was like, this is I gotta move here, I think. This it was pretty amazing. And just seeing kind of public display of solidarity with Palestine in China was not something I necessarily expected. Of course, like the, diplomatically there is support and solidarity, but um seeing it on the ground when I would see this less in like so many other places who would like deeply supporting the genocide. Um it was just amazing. And then the photo on the left, Mimi's not in it, but we were there together. And this was such, again, an amazing experience. We were walking in this park, and before this, we'd seen that someone was singing in the forest, like in within the trees. He had such a beautiful voice, and he was just singing, like for no reason, and that was amazing. And you have to imagine that in the backdrop. To then I think so they were doing TikTok dances, right, Mimi? I think you could tell us better than I can.
Yeah, so I took Nuvpreet to this park because I mean, honestly, every park in Shanghai or in China in general is like this. And obviously, they're really amazing and beautiful, natural spaces that are public, that are free. And they are in the middle of the city, but it never feels like that. So that's obviously a really nice reprieve from the city. But what I love the most is the people watching, like the kind of people watching that you can do, not just because there's like weird things happening, but more so because the elders. And I am pretty obsessed with watching elders live their life to the fullest. And in China, that is a guarantee. Like you will see elders dancing, singing, doing karaoke in the middle of, a park just by themselves or with a big group of people. You'll see them doing Xinjiang dances, Tibetan dances, TikTok dances, all these traditional dances as well as modern dances. And they are just so vibrant and alive and active. I don't know if some of you have seen, but there's videos of old people literally lifting weights or doing chin-ups and doing these group exercises. It's just like absolutely incredible and exactly what all our elders deserve. Also, our elders deserve public spaces, infrastructure that do not seclude them from society or make elders feel like they're no longer useful in society, which I feel like the West often discards its elders as well. So in China, that is definitely not the case. And I also think because culturally, there's a very, very, very strong culture of respect for our elders. It is actually prioritized that our elders are taken care of, that they have all these facilities, that they have space to enjoy their lives fully. So this park, there was a group of women doing a TikTok dance, and they were very happy, and they were all dressed to impress. And I was actually talking to Nuvpreet about how sometimes I wonder if the next generation will carry on this tradition. And just as I said that, right across the pond, there was a group of young girls who were mimicking the dance groups, not in like a make fun of way, but who were genuinely trying to learn the dance that the aunties were doing. And then they eventually came over and joined the aunties in dancing. So it was like a really sweet intergenerational movement that still sticks in my brain. And the thing also, again, like I said, just because I live here doesn't make these moments any less special. And I see them on an everyday basis. And I'm reminded about the elders in all over China. And I speak to them often. I always have very long conversations with them. And they tell me like genuinely life as an elder is so joyous in China. Some of them say, they absolutely can't wait till they retire because they know that that's when another chapter of their lives will start and it's going to be so blessed and so happy and they can travel wherever they want and be super, super social. Like I'm in multiple group chats of aunties who just invite me into their dance sessions and invite me to dinner, invite me to their homes, try to find me a husband. So it is just amazing how social and active and happy a lot of these elders are. And there are also elder universities in China as well that teach a lot of people skills, teach retired people any skill they want to learn, either for free or for very, very, very affordable prices. Like if they want to learn drumming, if they want to learn any kind of specific dance, if they want to learn how to sing, if they want to learn how to act, if they want to learn how to do calligraphy, like all these things are available, which is really great. So yeah, I'm very passionate about this. And that moment was very special.
Yeah. I think it was also really symbolic of some of the other moments, or like the first like thing I noticed in the parks or in the public spaces, even in the park in Ningbo first day, was that these parks are occupied by predominantly children and older people. And those are the two groups of people in Western society that I feel are just like seen as a nuisance, seen as a bother, and like kind of made to be removed from public spaces. And that's definitely the case in the UK. And like to see spaces for people just was like just felt so I don't know, it just again it like it gives people humanity. Like people are just being human in these parks and we can all be there together. Whereas I could never have imagined such a moment would exist like in the West. That wasn't, I don't know, like much more orchestrated. Like this, they were just doing this because this public space is available to them. They were dancing together because they can in this area, and people were all enjoying it, and it wasn't. I don't know. I think again seeing like the young people as well engage in not a mimicking or like horrible way, but because they have, I don't know, the dynamic was just so profound that yeah, I think about it a lot and try and work out like how this was just like a random instance we had just walking through, and how many of these instances are happening all across China all the time. And I think it symbolizes a lot of things about public space and about who's included in public space that just feels it's amazing. This feels like a success of like developing a country. And I think that was another reflection I've been having a lot was like China feels like the richest place on earth, or like the richest place I've ever been to, because everybody can access spaces like this that feel like things are like good and prosperous. Whereas you actually go to the richest country in the world and people aren't able to occupy space like this. There is like intense inequality and suffering that wouldn't allow this to happen. Um, so I was really moved and really happy by, I don't know, and getting to be in these public spaces and see how people interact and are able to. Um, After that, I went to Nanjing, which like the I think one of the biggest things to do here is go to the massacre memorial, which is the site or one of the sites of the Japanese massacre where like 300,000 people were killed in less than a year. And I remember before I went, Mimi was like, "This is gonna be a really like intense place to go to," and it really was. Like it was just I don't know, it very very moving, but yeah, like horrible. I mean, yeah, I don't know how else to say it, but it was really also really hard not to see so much of Palestine in the museum constantly. Um, and I think apart from just, I don't know, just the way the museum was done, which was so beautifully and so it was just so moving and so many people were there. I thought the conclusion was really, really incredible. And I think it speaks to a lot of what we see is that like what some like why China has a foreign policy position of peace and diplomacy um, is because they understand what it's like when you're a warmongering country. Um, they have experienced it. And I think the last sentence here is one that is very common in a lot of museums. I think it's pretty amazing to actually see how even when the US is involved, China is the curation is always about peace and prosperity together. Whereas anytime I see anything about China and US media, it's completely the opposite. Um, but yeah, I just think having like wanting to connect together with people around the world for like peace and prosperity for all of us was pretty amazing. And again, I think that concept is so attacked in the West. Like the idea that it's even a thing to say that we want peace, first of all, and also like common peace is so profound. It, yeah, I think that leaving with that conclusion, I was like, this is why the US hates China, because that is a warmongering state that can only exist in a state of war. And the idea that we don't want that to happen already challenges so much of all of US foreign and domestic policy. Um, yeah, Mimi, what did you have like similar thoughts at the museum?
Yeah, I mean, the Nanjing massacre is definitely a very painful scar for a lot of Chinese people. I mean, Chinese people we are taught and educated to remember this moment all the time. I mean, reading the conclusion, it says to forget history is an act of betrayal, right? And so this history is extremely important for us Chinese people to also have confidence in our country and to make sure that it never happens again. which again, like you said, Nuvpreet, explains some of China's foreign policy and also explains why China is very adamant on standing up against the US, as we have also witnessed during the trade war that is happening at the moment. Um, but if you go on Chinese social media, which I spend more time on than Western media because it definitely also cleanses my brain, it is almost a no-brainer to be pro-Palestine. You know, I feel like on Meta apps or whatever, I find it very common to be shadow banned or to be censored if you post something about Palestine. Whereas on Chinese apps, you can be extremely vocal about Palestine. You can have pictures of the Israeli flag burning. You know, you can have all of these images and all of these discussions, and none of it gets censored or banned, which again, you know, is a commentary on the so-called free speech that you can find in America. But something that a lot of Chinese people often draw reference to when they talk about Palestine is they reference the Nanjing massacre, actually. So they talk about how this Nanjing massacre, in a lot of Chinese people's hearts, that is what also reminds them of what is happening in Palestine right now, Nuvpreet, as you said. And there's a famous quote that is kind of going viral on Chinese social media right now, where it's like, it is, you know, undoubtable that we would support Palestine because we know what it feels like to experience a genocide, and we did many, many years ago when Japan tried to colonize us. So it is an extremely important part of history, and even though it is very heavy, I highly recommend everyone go. I also think it is one of the most important museum experiences you can have in China. Um, but yeah, very important.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, it makes so much sense, I think, in understanding. Um, and then the other parts of Nanjing that I thought were amazing. Again, my favorite thing was the Martyrs Memorial Parks, which is what is on the left. And in this park, which was kind of different to the others, each kind of pavilion and monument was actually just built from crowdfunding. So I think this monument here, which I love because of the marks as the sun, um, it was like a bit bigger, but it was like raised by I think 300,000 people like donating a little bit of money. And there was another one that was like a children's like Young Pioneers Memorial kind of thing. And again, that was also raised, I think, by like 100,000 children giving like a penny or something, which I thought was just so beautiful to have again these monuments that people can feel part of. So like we built this, even though, you know, it cost like a very little amount to do. I think that as a principle was really amazing. Instead of having like one donor fund this entire thing and then it's named after this one like donor who's, I don't know, like trying to do it to for like philanthropy. Like this is kind of the opposite of that. And my other favorite part of Nanjing was again the view, but I was staying in this hotel that I think was like it's like one of the top 300 tallest buildings in the world. And I think that per night it cost like I think it was maybe like $35 to be on like a really high part of this building. And I was getting to see these skylines with like the mountain in the background was incredible. Um, the skylines were just overwhelming all the time. I was like coming back to London, looking at the skyline, I was like, this is unimpressive now, actually. You've had so long to build this and you haven't built anything new for like decades. Whereas look at Nanjing. So I loved that part as well. And then after that, we went to Qingdao, and again, Mimi is here for this part as well. Mimi's videos on Qingdao are really incredible, I think, and give a really good sense of what it was like if you haven't watched them. But my favorite thing we did that was walk along the water, and I think we like someone was running and like started speaking to us and told us that it was like 40 kilometers, I think, of public path. And on the path, there are multiple toilets. I think like toilets every few kilometers or something. Free toilets, free public toilets, which again, profound. and kind of unbelievable that that exists as just like a public walk. Whereas I saw like very recently a statistic that I think like only 1% of beaches in Jamaica are actually public access, which is so infuriating to hear. And then you come to a beach here in Qingdao. First of all, I was also shocked that there was an amazing beach here, but all these beaches are public. They're for people to be, and they were there. I think again, it just speaks to like how spaces are made for people and made for people to hang out and also take these beautiful wedding photos. It felt like such a magical experience walking here and just seeing people in these beautiful dresses, having these like photos at sunset. It it was so perfect. And such an amazing place again, made because you don't have to pay to sit on like a deck chair and some like Hilton hotel is like open.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of want to, you know, echo what you're saying, Nuvpreet, and also kind of emphasize that Qingdao is technically a tier two city. So for those of y'all that don't really know what that means, in China there are these different levels of like different tiered cities just based on like how wealthy these cities are, how commercial or like big these cities are. And so Qingdao is considered a tier two city, so it doesn't make as much money as Shanghai does or Beijing does, example, the capital cities, right? The big mega cities. But Qingdao as a tier two city, just because it is ranked as a tier two city doesn't mean it gets treated like a lower tier city. It is still extremely clean. It is still extremely well kept. There's so many facilities as well, like Nuvpreet said, on this trail of like this gorgeous cliff walk that we did. There are about like 50 public restrooms that you could see, you know? I also have researched the amount of public toilets in Qingdao, a tier two city, and it is 5,000 public toilets. You know, it is significantly smaller than Shanghai, but it's just as amazing. And also, if you can look at the beach, you can see already that it is so clean. It is also one of the busiest ports in the world. And considering that, you wouldn't think that the water would be that clean, but the water is extremely clean, like crystal clear. Navpreet and I actually like dipped our fingers in there and we could literally like see that it was crystal clear. So I
Wow.
just kind of, sorry.
No, I was just gonna say that that moment was surreal. Like you can see this big, like huge shipping container in the distance, and then right in front of you, this the clearest water I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah, and I think what that reminds me is that no place in China gets left behind. You know, I think, when I've spent time in the US and I actually couldn't leave the US for 4 years because of visa complications, I traveled a lot of it. You know, I drove all the way through it. I drove like this way and that way. But it was so barren and neglected in so many places, especially where a lot of indigenous people live, especially in the desert areas. But in China, no place gets left behind. Just yesterday, I was in Guizhou, which is the most mountainous region of China, but also one of the poorest regions of China. But when I say poorest regions of China, there is still a lot of infrastructure, also very, very, very clean, which is very, very impressive considering that it's so mountainous. You know, it's extremely challenging and expensive to build infrastructure that can pass through mountains. You have to, build a lot of caves, you have to build a lot of bridges, but they're all built and there are train stations in all these small village areas in these rural regions. No place in China gets left behind, and you can really feel that. So I know a lot of people here have been to China or really want to go to China. And if you do get to come again, I would highly recommend not just going to the big mega cities, even though they are incredible, but having a look at the tier two cities, the lesser known cities, doing some research on that. And most importantly, and I think most profoundly, the rural regions, because you will see that they are just as clean and they have just as many public toilets and they have just as many community centers. They have electricity, they have running water, dignity is there and therefore the celebrations are there, the joy is there. So please come back to China.
Yeah, exactly like what you said. I think it's, I guess I had like expectations of Shanghai and Beijing and what they'd be like. and they surpass my expectations. But going to these places that are like tier two, I'd love to go to somewhere like tier three and see like, actually how it's probably not very different. But a lot of these places were more amazing to me than going to Shanghai. They, it's just, I think it's an incredible project that you can like you build not just one small part of a country, but actually like build outwards. Like it feels like a completely different model to kind of like the core periphery that we're used to. I think in the UK, that's a really big thing where London is so different from the rest of the UK because all the investment is in London. And it's really the only place that has any focus for development. And lots of the other cities are left behind. They're like, particularly as you go to the north. And and again, that's just like a choice. That's a choice because that's what capital is in London, and there's very little regard for the rest of it. And that's just completely the opposite, in China. The other things were like seeing the doves like on a building like that was just beautiful. Like this incredible mosaic. Again, the public space is like taken care of. There's care, and there's also messages of like peace just around. There's not like I don't know, a Lockheed Martin or BAE Systems advert on a building. Instead, it's these beautiful doves. And the other thing that we did was we went to a wet market in Qingdao, and I got to try white, like rose strawberries for the first time, which was incredible. And all this, the fresh fruit and fresh vegetables around, was just amazing. And again, like Mimi's video on this is so good. Um, like the inclusion of it because you kind of it's not what you're sold as an idea in the West, like what you think a wet market in China is this like scary, dirty, infectious, disease-ridden place. And it's like, no, this is the freshest farmers market you've ever been to in your life. I don't know if you have anything else on that, Mimi.
Yeah, I love it. And I echo again everything you say. I think it's very important to see all or as much as you can about China because there's just so much that the West doesn't tell you. I mean, I am thinking about Speed's amazing stream because it actually really, really moved me. I was not even a Speed fan, or I really didn't know about him before, but his streams, I think, also really show the China that a lot of people didn't know about or didn't even want to see. And yes, Susie, Speedstream was very, very popular in China. Like people were just thanking him all the time. Like, thank you for showing us, or thank you for showing the world what China is really like. He didn't just go to Beijing or Shanghai. He also went to Changsha, which is like also another tier two city or maybe tier three. Um, and it was so cool to see his very raw, real-time experience in China. So, yeah, I just can't recommend it enough to just see China for yourself.
Yeah, totally. And then yeah, the other thing, fine. So before going to Beijing, obviously I got a train. And this again, this is if you haven't been on a train in China, this is generally what it would look like, which again is blowing my mind looking at it and looking at the train I went on just this week. Makes me too sad to look at actually. But like Mimi said, I had to try ordering something to the seat, and that was just an incredible experience to have. That as a possibility is just absolutely incredible. It was very fun. I was very obsessed with doing that. Um, and then yeah, finally, I went to Beijing. I think a lot of like Beijing is like, wow, these are these incredible places that I've like heard of and like such historic, amazing places, and to actually be there was really profound. And obviously at this point, I'd experienced a lot of China, so a lot of the things that are incredibly moving and incredible exist here too. But I just was like silently thinking about them. Um, yeah, and some of the skyline was also incredible here. I think what kind of felt different in Beijing is because it's such a historic place, the skyline doesn't dominate everywhere. But it is still there, which was amazing. Um, And the last thing, like, yeah, the museums. I like love museums, and there's so many amazing museums in China. If you like museums, this is the place to go to. They are doing things that no one else is in any museums in the world. On the right, this was like a box, and there were screens everywhere. I don't know how you would even do this. And they would like, I should have included it as a video, but it was like moving and like you were in these places. It was like telling of history like this was absolutely like wow, I was amazed. Um, and then on the left was this exhibition that was talking about like AI and technology. And kind of as I mentioned before, it was amazing to hear how they were talking about technology, which was like we want to use these amazing advancements to benefit people. So, on the parts around the walls, it was talking about like how we can use it in healthcare and in transport and to make life better and easier for people. How can we can use like robotics and technology in surgery, um, getting like 5G to everyone in the country. And I think the overall messaging was just like, yes, we want this technology advancement is great because it's in public interest instead of how we are forced to engage with technology is like we have to use these chat bots that are like making art for us and then also the same technology that's literally used to develop weapons. And it's just such a sickening idea that we have about technology. And I think the fundamental thing is like that doesn't have to be the way. Like the technology is not the evil thing, it's whose hands it's in. And I think the possibility, and I think made me very hopeful, was that the possibility that we have these technological advancements feels so scary because it's like, well, in the US, they're just using this technology to better target weapons and surveillance and like warfare, whereas it actually feels like it's making life better and easier in China. And the fact that that's actually a way people are living, and like a lot of people in the world are living, really made me feel like I don't know. That was like one bit of hope I think I felt is one area that people talk about a lot in the West right now is like technology and the fear about AI is not like just an overall fundamental thing. There's actually like very positive. And I think that's and the photo in the middle is from um a museum and this museum had like kind of 30 wax figures, I think, of like revolutionary martyrs. And I think this is Li Hulan, who is amazing. I learned about her for the first time when she was like born in like a really rural part of China in like during the Civil War and got involved in like kind of feminist communism is the only way I can understand it now. And she was like captured and killed when she was 15 by Kuomintang. But she, as like a martyr, like having this amazing like teenager as part of your like history of revolution was I also thought really amazing. And again, something that continued no matter that this was like in like the main museum in Beijing. This is the second biggest museum in the world. And they still will have this positive like revolutionary history was also very impressive to me. That's the end of my photos. I don't know if you have anything on any of these, Mimi, or I can stop sharing.
Megan, how are we going for time? Do we have to wrap up?
I would probably wrap up soon just because I think people are starting to leave. But yeah, it's okay if we go over a little bit. It's not, big deal. And if anybody wants to ask any questions, then we could leave some time for that. Or anybody, you can just put your questions in the chat and then we can get to that. Have any? When is everyone coming back? As soon as possible.
Yeah, I've already
Yeah,
I'm looking at all the scholarships and like how I can do another master's degree.
feel that.
Yeah, what a great place to retire.
But
I
then,
also just wanted to say thank you, so many of you and Mimi, you spoke to us about the community service centers, right? And that
Mhm.
was very much in line with what you were talking about. The sort of here we hear about how people who work for Uber or Amazon don't even get to use the restroom, right? It's like such a rush. And then you told us about the communities, and I was mind blown when I went. I looked like I was high on drugs. I
You
just
went to
could
one?
not believe it. Oh yeah, I went. I filmed. Of course, I haven't posted it, but do you want to talk about it, Mimi? Because it just blew my mind. I think it really speaks to exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, so in most neighborhoods, I would say in every neighborhood, so in all the kind of cities, especially the urban centers, there is a 15-minute circle rule. So within the 15-minute walk, there has to be education, toilets, obviously, as well as healthcare and a community center. And actually, it's sometimes within that 15 minutes, you can get two or three community centers. And these public community centers are basically just centers. I mean, I just went into one day just because the hammer and sickle was on it and it looked very enticing to me. I didn't know what to expect, but I went in and there was really nice toilets, canteens, yeah, like Susie, you're saying, like really high tech kind of technology that can help people out. There's blood pressure monitoring, there's theaters, there's libraries, all these public services for people to just use, like free to go in at any point of time. There's no like security or anything. There's just someone who's at the desk who's like, hey, do you need any help? Whatever. It's kind of just like a rest stop for anyone who just needs to do something, right? And so that's one. But there are also these places that are called the red worker bee stations. So they're places for delivery drivers, outdoor workers, sanitation workers to go and just chill. So now I've learned that delivery drivers, it's mandatory to take breaks in between your shifts because delivery driving is obviously it's pretty tough work and it's outdoors and it can get very like long hours depending on how many deliveries you take a day. And so there are these delivery drivers rest stations that have like microwaves and water stations and blood pressure and books and stuff like that that delivery drivers and outdoor workers can just go and sit and rest and chill with each other. And so I often see them and I often see a lot of workers just chilling together, taking breaks together. And they're so amazing. And if you want to go to one, literally all you have to search is community center. And I think within a 15-minute radius, there's so many. Um, Susie, you can tell the difference usually because there is a little icon that tells you that has like a delivery driver person. But in general, the community centers are open to everybody, and they are located everywhere. So yeah, it's amazing. I've just never seen anything like it. And when I went the first time, I kind of got addicted to going to all of them. And I also recommend that everybody go. The thing about China is that it's not just like the big, amazing touristic places that are impressive, which they all absolutely are, but it is the day-to-day services that are some of my favorite thing about being here on a daily basis. A lot of my videos, they don't really talk about like the massive, grand, travel experience. They talk more about the everyday facilities that you can get. Some of my most, I guess, known videos are ones about community canteens where you can get a full meal for like $3 and it's like portioned and there's all this health information about it. They're hot meals served to you throughout the day, and elders get heavily discounted on this. And yeah, that is what impresses me the most. And I think that is the most profound thing about being in China. I truly feel taken care of as a human being, which I did not feel that way living in the West for a very long time. Yes,
Thank-
Dana. Also, hi, Dana.
oh, Dana's here.
You have to go to one. Or I mean you've already been to one, but try to go into any and all of them. I've been to some where there's literally like community movie screenings as well. Or I went to one where there was a drawing class happening and it was kids and elders drawing together and they were drawing what like a beautiful day would look like. It was I was like in tears. There's free basketball lessons. There was a community center with free calligraphy, free chess, free dance classes, like free ping pong, free gyms, like all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I've taken a lot of people there. That's instead of taking people to like, touristic attractions, I'm like, we're going to a community center today, let's go. Also libraries. I always take people to libraries too.
No, I was just gonna say on the community center front, like my assumption always is like the government or like local council has to be forced to give anything to the public. Like maybe it was like a concession they made if they were allowed to like, I don't know, get a tax break or something. Well, they like have to build something that's more affordable or for people. But that feels like the total opposite. Like going to a community center felt like one of the most luxurious places in the whole area. Like they weren't just doing it because they had to do it. They're doing it because they want to, and like this is like a worthy investment. Like any other like public spaces I think of, or like libraries, and the very few ones that are left in the UK are like just like dingy 1960s, not been renovated since then, buildings where like there's complete underfunding, like relegated to not being really an important place. Whereas that's like totally opposite. Like the public spaces and the public buildings are the ones that are the most invested in. And like, I think the idea that that could be as nice as like the private five-star hotel, which is what I felt like I was really just so impressed by that.
And Susie, to answer your question about the libraries, they are magnificent. They are so big. Like Nuvpreet said, they just feel like places of pure luxury, but they are free and open to the public. The children's section is always like huge and incredible. The I mean the one right by my home, which like 10 minutes away, it has 7 floors of different books and exhibitions, and there's a music listening room, and it's just like the funding is they put a lot of funding into these public spaces. Yeah, Susie, you got to come back just for a library. I'll take you on a countrywide library tour. That could be my new niche, but yeah, and they have
Sign
so
me
many
up. I'm coming. Community centers and libraries.
yeah. Yeah, exactly. And they have so many things for people with specific needs as well. Like if you have hearing needs or if you can only read in Braille, like there's all these kinds of rooms and facilities that allow people of all specific needs to go and to enjoy. So, yeah, and literacy and reading is extremely valued in China and it's extremely, important. And a lot of the kids are, I mean, also on any given day in any of the libraries, they are packed, like packed. There are so many people of all ages just sitting there and reading, which is amazing considering it's such a phone heavy society as well, because everything is so convenient and on the phone. I think something that I think maybe was a natural kind of question for me was, oh, is everybody just converting to their phones now? But no, reading is still a very essential part of everyday society as well. And you can see it at any library that you go to. Sign up for my library tour. Incoming.
May I ask? I think we discussed this, but can you remind me, talking about the phone heavy culture?
Yeah.
Obviously, the algorithms, everything is different. You know, in the West, we're terribly divided, and we hear about the impact on mental health and alienation and isolation and compare and despair. What's the relationship there like, do you feel, in terms of how people can consume social media and impact on mental health and, how that's impacting society? I know that's a big question, but do you have any general impressions?
That is a great question. And I think just from my observations, which I don't think would encompass as large a question, I do also definitely see people like totally absorbed by their phones a lot. Like if you go on a train, you can see people, everyone's kind of on their phones, which I think is pretty, common in a lot of major cities. But what I do think is kind of like where it is different is that the public spaces are also there, right? So there might be a lot of phones and there might be a lot of engagement with phones as well, but there also is the ability to go to different parks, and there also is the ability to go to the library or go to engage in sports. There's so much encouragement to be active, to be healthy, to be outdoors. There was like a greenification campaign of China in like the 90s, where the Communist Party, they just created so many parks as well. So I think it's just like very encouraged for people to be active, to be outside, to not always be on their phones all day. Though, of course, having a phone does affect people, and I'm sure, like anyone, being on social media all the time is very draining. But I also do, it does just feel different. It definitely does feel quite different because there is at least access to public spaces, and a lot of public spaces as well. And in general, I don't think that the phone is taking over the lives of that many people just because alternatives are there.
All right. Um, well, thank you so much, Mimi, for joining us from Shanghai. I know it's getting late there, or I'm not sure where you are. And Nuvpreet, what a very inspiring presentation. You make us all want to go to China, and you made me want to go back as soon as possible. So thank you both um, for a wonderful presentation. We all really appreciate it, and we love you, and we love China. And thank you everyone also for joining.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for showing your love to China. It means a lot.
Take care, everybody.